Former President Barack Obama claimed responsibility for the booming economy and launched a scathing attack on Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. The 44th U.S. president also branded his successor a demagogue who was part of the culture of celebrating bullies. Speaking to a crowd of thousands in a school auditorium in Cleveland, Ohio, yesterday, Obama lashed out at Trump's tax cuts for the most wealthy and powerful and said the policy would damage the economy in the long run. While backing Ohio's Democratic governor nominee Richard Cordray, the former commander-in-chief claimed responsibility for the current state of the U.S. economy and said the upturn in growth started on his watch. Trump has repeatedly made record-low unemployment and the strong American economy the centerpiece of his administration. On Monday, he tweeted, "The economy is so good, perhaps the best in our country's history." But to a cheering crowd last night, Obama slammed Trump's economic policy and said the boom began under his presidency, saying, "Just remember when it started." He also criticized Trump for his subsidy for corporate polluters with a handout of $1.5 trillion in tax credits that would have to be fixed by a Democrat like me coming back in. Obama also declared that Americans are supposed to stand up to bullies, not follow them, and railed against the post-truth era. He said, "Some things are complicated. When I was president, I was confident the American people wanted the truth. When there's a vacuum in our democracy, when we don't vote, when we take our basic rights for granted, other voices fill the void, and demagogues who promise simple fixes to complicated problems." The former president said Republican control of Washington would threaten Medicaid, affordable health care, and even democracy. Obama also slammed opportunists who undermine democratic institutions by exploiting divisions in society for political gain. He also said the current administration makes it harder for minorities, young people, and poor folks to vote. Although he didn't blast President Donald Trump by name, he slammed the current administration, saying, "This is not normal what we're seeing. It is radical." He said, "Even the folks who won don't seem happy. Have you noticed that the Republicans won the House, they won the Senate? They're still mad, which is interesting. So just remember when you hear about these folks bragging about this economic period, just remember when it started," he added. Obama said Republicans appeal to our tribal instincts. They appeal to fear. They try to pit one against another. They try and say border security will keep out those folks who don't look like us or sound like us. That's a playbook as old as time. In a healthy democracy, that playbook doesn't work. He also warned against voter indifference, saying it was the biggest threat to democracy, adding, "If you don't like the direction of the country, you can't just get angry. You can't just mutter to yourself while you're watching TV. You can't just move. You've got to vote." Cordray, who previously worked as his Consumer Financial Protection Bureau director, Obama called "my friend," faces Republican Attorney General Mike DeWine in one of the season's most closely watched governor's races. Share this article. You will read quotes from Republicans saying, "Wow, this is messed up. Well, why aren't you doing something about it? Well, We can't, because we really like these tax cuts for the wealthy. So we'll put up with crazy, he said during his speech. Democrats hope to seize back control of the office in Ohio for their party, which is out of power at every level of Ohio government, and boot out Republican Governor John Kasich. Obama also appeared with U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, who faces a challenge from Republican Jim Marinacci, a congressman from Wadsworth. The appearance is part of a swing across the country by Obama to boost Democrats' efforts to win House seats in state elections. Ohio marked Obama's third campaign stop following speeches in Anaheim, California and Urbana, Illinois. He's been crisscrossing the nation urging voters to head to the polling stations, particularly spending time in red areas. Barack Obama's attack on Republican threat to democracy speech at a time when there's a lot of change going on, demographic shifts and technological changes, and there's rising inequality, and people's lives have been disrupted, and they start worrying about whether their lives will be passed on to their children. Even if you do not agree with the Democratic position on these issues, even if you are an independent, even if you are an old-fashioned Republican, you should still cast your ballot for Richard Cordray. Because what's at stake goes beyond partisan politics. The biggest threat to our democracy is cynicism. There needs to be a restoration of honesty and decency and lawfulness in our government. People are stressed, they are angry. All the chatter and anger on television doesn't match up to their lives, and it breaks our civic trust, and it makes people think the game's rigged and nobody's looking out for them. And historically, those kind of divisions, that's ripe for opportunists trying to exploit America's history of division, racial, ethnic, religious. Politicians try to keep us angry, and they appeal to our tribal instincts and appeal to fear, and they try to pit one against the other, and they tell us we need security from those folks who don't look like us or pray like us. That is an old playbook. It's as old as time, and as it gets closer to election day, you can rely on more and more politicians to pull out the playbook. And here's the thing, in a healthy democracy, that playbook doesn't work. If there's a democracy where everyone is participating and paying attention and listening and voting, people of both parties call out the fear-mongers, and then they work to compromise and to get things done. But when there's a vacuum in our democracy, when we don't vote, when we take our basic rights for granted, other voices fill the void, and demagogues who promise simple fixes to complicated problems. Some things are complicated. When I was president, I was confident the American people wanted the truth, wanted to know what was what. They'll promise to fight for the little guy when they're pandering to the most wealthy and powerful, and they'll say they are fighting corruption, and they start undermining those institutions that are most essential to our democracy. They try to threaten free speech and start unwinding campaign finance laws and make it harder for young people and minorities to vote and poor folks to vote. They subsidize corporate polluters and hand out $1.5 trillion in tax credits without saying how they will pay for them. Partly because they figure when a Democrat like me has to come back in and clean up this stuff, they say, oh, these deficits are terrible, and that's why we have to cut Medicare. What happened to all this concern about deficits?